Hello, this is Jean Marie Ward for Buzzy Magazine. With me today is R.S. Belcher, the author of Six Gun Tarot. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Okay, you are living the geek dream. You've had an award-winning Star Trek story published, you've run a comic book store, and now you've got a great first novel out from Tor Books, Six Gun Tarot. How did you manage it?
Oh my God. Well, the Star Trek story, there was a contest that Simon & Schuster Pocket Books did called Strange New Worlds, which they were looking for amateur writers. They were looking for people who were not pros. Mm-hmm. And that was the whole sort of premise of the series. It was fiction written by fans, for fans. And I had never written a genre piece before, so I was kind of intrigued. And I love Star Trek. I'm like a huge Star Trek geek. And I tried my hand at writing a Star Trek story, and it was a little bit of a mashup, which just seems to be kind of the way I write. Took some things from several different eras of Star Trek and kind of stuck them together. And submitted it. Didn't hear anything back. I thought I hadn't even placed at all in anything. Got a call from the editor with Simon & Schuster, Lisa Kaysen, I believe was her name. And she said, basically, you won the grand prize. So,
cool.
So I screamed and danced around a lot. My daughter, who was like 5 or 6 at the time, like looks at me like I'm crazy. Says, "Dad, calm down." So that was my first published piece. We have, as far as the comic book store stuff goes, I've loved comics since I learned to read with comics, and I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work with get involved with some comic book stores. I actually, at the convention we're at now, I did a panel on being a comic book store owner, kind of a cautionary tale, and have enjoyed that. It's hard work and it's a business, and as many businesses in our current economic times, they struggle. Sometimes they fail. We closed our last store, the last store I was involved with, in May, which worked out kind of well because I had been working on Six Gun, the novel, for several years while I was working at one comic store and then opening another one, and sold Six Gun. Literally, I met a very nice editor from Tor Books at Dragon Con in the Tor panel, and I pitched the book to her, and I was very fortunate that it was something that Tor was looking for as far as the genre goes, which is Six Gun Tarot is a fantasy set in 1869 Nevada, so it's a Western. At its heart, it's a Western. And I sort of, it was really luck. I was very fortunate. She was interested in the premise. I sent her some initial pages and a plot summary. Didn't hear anything back for quite a while because they're really busy people. Got an email that was very encouraging, saying I like this. The other editors that have looked at it like this. We're going to try to find you someone to work with. If we can't, this particular editor was nice enough to say she was going to try to help me find maybe an agent to get this thing moving. And I would talk to some friends of mine who are writers and said that this was very unprecedented. This doesn't usually happen. They're usually
that's wild.
We don't, it doesn't meet our needs at this time. Thank you so much. But this editor, her name is Stacy Hill. Stacy was kind enough to believe in my work, and she was kind enough to kind of help me with it as much as she could. She got my manuscript in front of Greg Cox, who is very well known. He writes a lot of Star Trek fiction. He does a lot of stuff with DC Comics novelizations for Justice League and Final Crisis and stuff like that. He does just a lot of different kinds of books like that, and he's also an editor for Tor. Well, Greg read my manuscript and liked it enough to go to bat for me to try to get it purchased. Tor purchased it, and then we underwent about 2 years of editing and revision and all of that, and then Six Gun just came out in January. So I'm really lucky. I believe in my work. I think I put out a good manuscript, but I was very fortunate to meet some very kind people who were willing to give me an opportunity.
That's,
got lucky.
and that's very cool, because it's so seldom that people sell books without getting the agent first, especially to a publisher like Tor.
That's what I've been led to understand is I did not have an agent. I have one now. Her name is Lucy Ann Diver. She's with the Knight Agency.
Yeah.
And she is fabulous. Within a very short period of time of having her representing me, she sold a sequel to the Six Gun Tarot to Tor Books. And she also sold a urban fantasy that I'm working on called, the working title is The Greenway. And that'll probably change. Basically, those have just been sold. The ink on the contract's still wet. But I'm working currently on both of those projects, and then hoping to get started on something else before the end of the year.
What was the genesis of Six Gun Tarot?
I write, and this is the same way with the Star Trek story that I did, is I tend to like, if something is fun or interesting to me, I will throw it in. I'm kind of a kitchen sink sort of guy. And I like, I think like, well, if this is here, if this is thing A and this is thing B, it's like chocolate and peanut butter. You put them together and hey, it's even better. That doesn't always work, and for some people they don't particularly like that style, but that seems to be the way I write, is kind of mashing stuff up. And with Six Gun, the original idea was I really like the idea of this little western town, kind of isolated, almost like in High Plains Drifter. You have this little kind of town that almost has this kind of purgatory sort of vibe to it, on the edge of this wasteland, where everyone had some kind of a weird secret or some sort of a bizarre past, sort of Peyton Place or Twin Peaks kind of vibe to it. And that was just really the initial thing. Golgotha really is the main character in the story. I tried really hard to make it like an ensemble, so you have all these different characters kind of bouncing around, and everybody has favorites, and you get, everybody is kind of the hero of their own story. But I tried to make it so the novel doesn't have a main character. There is sort of a character that's sort of your ambassador, kind of your eyes going in, but he leaves you after a while.
Literally your eye going in.
Aha! That's very good, yes.
Sorry.
No, that's very good. But basically, Golgotha is sort of the main character in the story, and she is this very complicated. On the surface, it looks like almost, and I tried to put a lot of like Western tropes in it. I wanted you to have the square-jawed sheriff, and I wanted to have sort of the crusty deputy, and just a lot of the things that you see traditionally in the Western mythology. But I really wanted to kind of like twist it a lot, make it so that the reader has this kind of jarring sort of, whoa, wait a minute, what is this feel to the story. So the basic premise is, Golgotha is this town full of secrets, and it attracts the best and the worst, the blessed and the damned. And that was the initial genesis. And that was like in the early 2000s is when I came up with that. And I kicked around some chapters and tried a few things, and that never felt quite right. After I won the Star Trek contest and had that published, I kind of got a little more wind in my sails after that, and I decided I was going to go back and try to work on a novel. And Golgotha had always been sort of the, which was the original name of it, by the way, it was just called Golgotha. I wanted that to sort of be the thing I wanted to work on. It's the one that kind of kept poking me in the brain. So I started working on that again, and things started to flow and click. And over the course of about 2.5 years, 3 years, I wrote the manuscript. And things just kind of came to me over the course of, so really, I started on this thing in 2000, sold it around 2009. It's come out now in 2013. Actually, 2010 is when I sold it, I think. It's come out in 2013. So about 13 years worth of stuff has been kind of percolating with Golgotha, and I think people kind of pick up on some of that. I tried to make the town very realistic. I sketched out a map of the town. I can kind of see things. I try to make it so it's very visually attractive. You know, so you basically people read this and they can kind of picture the town in their mind is what I wanted.
Did Golgotha derive in any way from your love of comics? Did any of the things that you love about comic books influence your depiction or the story itself?
I am a huge comic book guy, and I've always have been. One of my first memories as a child is my mother sitting on my mom's lap and her reading me an Avengers annual. And I actually remember that was part of the way of how I learned how to read. Because my mom would read comics to me, and I would follow along with little word balloons.
Yeah.
And I think that Six Gun Tarot has a very graphic novel sort of a feel to it. I've actually had people tell me they've read it and wondered if it wouldn't, if it could be used, you know, could become a graphic novel or something. I've had some people knocking around talking about, you know, film rights for it and stuff like that, because it is a very, I think if you read it, it's very visually driven.
Yeah.
And I tried to make it a very lot of descriptive details in there. So yeah, I think and some of the action scenes, some of the action sequences, the fights and some of that are pretty comic booky. They're over the top. There's, you know, I don't quite have people flying around on wires or anything, but a lot of the
That's for the sequel?
Yeah, you gotta ratchet it up. You know, we just had like the end of the universe in the first one, so I don't know what I'll do for the second one. But yeah, I think a lot of my characters are kind of larger than life, and they have that sort of four-color comic booky sort of thing to them. I try to make them very human and realistic on a lot of levels, but when it comes to the action, I guess it comes to their abilities, I did make them a little larger than life, because it's the West. It was a land of myths and legends and stuff. So.
And people were larger than life.
Larger than life. You know, if you wanted to have a, you know, if you were a kid, you know, back east, you wanted to read the little books about Wild Bill Hickok and all this other stuff, you know, all these, you know, Buffalo Bill and all these other guys, and they were larger than life.
What are you working on now?
Right now, I am fast at work on finishing the initial draft for an urban fantasy. The working title of it is The Greenway. The description I have used to kind of pitch it has been, it is basically a little bit of Harry Dresden, Jim Butcher, a lot of Raymond Chandler, throw in some Story of O, and add in maybe some Pulp Fiction.
Another stew.
It really is. It's a mashup too, and it is a modern. It's an urban fantasy caper crime detective novel. It's very gritty. It is definitely a rated R piece. You have rough talking, hard drinking magicians, and you have you know, you could call it Harry Potter: The Trainspotting Years if you wanted to. You know, what happens to Harry after college? You know, after he gets out of college, you know, and hits the junk for a while. So it's a novella that I wrote many years ago, and I really got a lot of good feedback on it, and decided it was worth turning into a novel. So the good folks at Tor seem to be of the same opinion. Yes. So they purchased that, and once I'm finished with that, which I should be wrapping that up probably in the next month or so, the next thing going is the sequel to Six Gun.
Thank you so much, Rod.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you from Buzzy Magazine.